Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. We will be getting started here shortly. Welcome to our webinar. I see a few people are trickling in here, so we'll just give it a few more seconds, Paul, and then we can get started.
Sounds good.
Throughout the webinar, feel free to drop any questions in the chat here. We'll definitely make sure to touch on those throughout the webinar and after. So make sure you're dropping any questions or anything that you have that comes to mind. And I think we're good to get started.
All right, sounds good. Thank you so much, Alexis. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it. I'm going to be spending a little less than an hour, maybe about 30, 45 minutes, kind of walking you through a few core things. We've been working really closely with multiple different domains, from manufacturing to financial services to healthcare to manufacturing. And one of the core challenges that we see that exists across all those domains is how teams efficiently and effectively work with data. Right, the past data pipelines, they don't cut it anymore. And we want to kind of walk you through what are those core challenges that we've seen and how can our AI agents and our semantic data models really help break down the barriers and enable your teams to work more efficiently with data. So we'll walk through that, see a few demos, and then hop into some Q&A. So over the past 2 to 3 years, we've been spending a lot of time with, like I had mentioned, folks from industry leaders from across different domains. And they always have the same type of wasteful, kind of painful work every quarter. And that's looking at all the different data, different formats, all locked away behind what we would consider both like access and understanding barriers. And this is a big kind of hindrance in them being able to, close books on a monthly or quarterly basis and just be able to get the work that they want to get done. And I can kind of walk you through, what does a traditional pipeline approach look like and why do we feel like it's just fundamentally broken, especially for finance operations and finance teams. If you think about kind of what happens in the real world, just spend weeks, building a data pipeline that extracts the right information from your invoices or your, data that you're getting from different vendors, transforming it, loading it into your data warehouse. Everything looks great until something changes. A vendor decides to, change column orders or change the format of their invoice, and then you're back to the beginning. Pipeline breaks, and now you have to wait in a queue, of waiting for your data engineering team to be able to add it to their backlog and get that work going. Or God forbid, you have to onboard a new vendor and you have to start that whole process over again, constantly playing catch up, spending time maintaining infrastructure, as opposed to actually getting the analysis work that you want to get done. And the cruel reality is once you get all that done, that data is old, right? It's not fresh. There's a lot of lag in the pipeline, and that really hinders your ability to be able to close books quickly and accurately. And so for finance teams, that lag, it matters, right? You want to close your books. You want to make sure you got all the data in the right format at the right time to be able to get that work done. But what really kills productivity is you have senior finance analysts on the team. They know the data inside and out. They know the reconciliation process. They know exactly what has to get done. And every time they need a new data source, they have to go back to the well. Or business logic changes, they have to work with a different team. And meanwhile, like quarter close is inching closer and closer, and you're not ready. And these we don't see are like edge cases. This is what is just reality for finance teams. And that's why we believe AI agents are really a fundamental shift in how this work gets done. And this is what we've seen when it comes to working with customers, that a lot of the time in itself is spent, once you get the data in the right format, just doing the work, right? It can take multiple hours to process 100+ page invoices. And a lot of that work and spent in time is obviously in things like Excel, being able to take data, copy it into Excel. Is error prone. You have a lot of issues with getting the data in the right format. And then doing the actual reconciliation work is something that can take hours of really, highly skilled finance analyst times. And a lot of times the work is just trying to track down those discrepancies, kind of moving swivel chair between different systems, between different, Excel VLOOKUPs and tables and data sources. And it's wasteful and it takes a lot of time. And I know some of you are probably thinking, hey, we have lots of tools, right? We have tools to solve a lot of these problems. And as we look at, how do you apply some of these tools and where are the kind of areas of brittleness and breakage, you might be thinking, hey, we have OpenAI Enterprise. We can throw this data, into an LLM and just see what happens. but they're great at being able to write emails, be able to kind of help you with marketing copy. But when it comes to reconciling a complex 200 plus page invoice with thousands of line items, that's where you start hitting limits, context limits, hallucination, and financial accuracy. You don't want to be able to, you can't talk to your auditor to say, hey, this is exactly how the process worked when it's just a big black box. With traditional BI tools, they have the same kind of data pipeline challenges, getting data in the right place, working with multiple teams. The analysts can't do that work themselves, right? And RPA has been something that a lot of teams have deployed, but if RPA has solved all these problems, you probably wouldn't be on this webinar, right? So what we see is just kind of a fundamental architectural shift and kind of moving away from old school data pipelines to really adopting AI agents and how they can really fundamentally shift the way that your teams work with data. The traditional approach, if you kind of walk through it step by step, because this is a lot of the pain that the customers that we start engaging with feel, is they might get an invoice, and usually as a junior analyst that's working on that invoice, they open it up, read through potentially hundreds of pages, copy that data into Excel, line by line, number by number, lots of error-prone hours of work, lots of typos and mistakes. And meanwhile, the payment data sits in the database, but your analysts can only ask very specific questions of that data. Otherwise, you have to write SQL or work with the data engineering team to get the data in the right format. And then usually all that data ends up back in Excel where the actual reconciliation happens. And where we see the fundamental shift is that same, if you're working with AI agents, you're working with our Semaphore platform, that same invoice, that PDF comes in, but instead of manually extracting the data, putting it into Excel, the agent reads it, document intelligence understands it just like a human would, and understands the layout, finds the tables, extracts all the line items, no manual work, no copy paste. And that data is now structured and ready for the agent to be able to get to use. Your payment data could still be in the database, doesn't have to move, but our semantic data models let you really quickly you connect to and let the agent understand what that data looks like so that you can just use natural language. So show me the payments for this vendor in January. The agent generates a SQL, gives you the results. No data pipeline, no moving data, direct access to your data. And the CSV files that are, or Excel files that are inevitability in each one of these business processes, we have a special capability that we call DataFrames that allows you to read those CSV files or Excel files directly into the agent. It allows it to be able to slice, dice, and transform the data in directly in memory with SQL accuracy outside of the context of the LLM. And so the big difference is that the agent can be at the center of that work, working with your analysts to be able to access the data, understand it, reconcile it. Just a few minutes to configure, doesn't take weeks to build. And you describe the work that you want to do in natural language and plain English, empowering those analysts to be able to do the work themselves. So those are the three integrated capabilities that we've built that fundamentally revolutionizes how you can work with data using agents. Our semantic data models are really focused on allowing agents to quickly connect to different data sources. It could be your Snowflake data, data in Redshift, Postgres, MySQL, and others, and be able to provide an AI-assisted layer on top of it that understands the data, enriches it with business context, so that when you're working with your agent, you can use the terms that are familiar to you: orders, invoices, line items, et cetera. Our DataFrames is a fundamental new capability that enables agents to really efficiently work with data from Excel files, CSV files. You can almost think of it like an in-memory database for the agent. So it can actually do the data transformation in the agent itself, and then use those data frames to kind of show its work, right? As it's incrementally working through data, you can see each kind of slice and copy of that data as it's working through and making decisions. And then finally, document intelligence. The majority of the use cases that we see today deal with unstructured data, difficult, complex payment remittance slips, extremely difficult Excel files, or 100+ page complex invoices. These are things that traditionally take a team of humans to really be able to understand and work with, because traditional automation tools and document AI tools really struggle with accuracy in this case. But we've fundamentally kind of rethought exactly how you can configure and work with documents using our platform. But what we want to do is just kind of give you a sense for how this works. We'll start with a quick receipt reconciliation use case. In this case, we're taking data from a database. This could be data that we've extracted from an ERP into Snowflake, and a few different CSV files from different vendors. And instead of having to copy the data into Excel, use VLOOKUPs, do a lot of this work manually, the work that a team of folks would do, the agent can actually connect to each one of these data sources, understand them deeply, and then be able to do that reconciliation with SQL-powered precision. So we'll take a look at that real quick. So I'm going to go ahead and hop over into our product. So we'll start first with looking at our semantic data models. We have a few different data sources. I have SAP data that we've extracted into Snowflake that has all the information about materials that we've purchased. And then we have a CSV file that we get from a vendor every month of what has shown up to our plants via railroad. But this time we want to add a data source. In this case, we want to reconcile against our trucking shipment data. So I can quickly just create a semantic data model, upload an example file that we'll be processing, and we automatically deeply inspect that data, understand what it means, the business context, looking for synonyms, sample values, so that the agent has a rich amount of data to be able to really understand what this means, to the agent. So the analyst can work with it using the terms that they're familiar with them. So if we want to kick off the process of identifying what materials have we bought that we haven't actually received yet via either rail or trucking, we can just simply upload the CSV files that we got from our vendors, ask the question, and then behind the scenes, the agent is really using that semantic data model to understand how to access the data. What are the relationships? What does the data actually look like? Automatically generating SQL so your analysts don't have to worry about it, to be able to do that heavy lift and do that work. Each step of the way, the agent's actually creating data in these data frames. These are really, really helpful and to enable you to kind of see insights into how the work was done, what different calculations did it make, but also helps people to offload a lot of the work to the agent itself. So if we need to ask follow-up questions to be able to group that data, drill into that data, it doesn't have to go back to the well. It doesn't have to go back to the database, to get the information. It can do all that directly in memory to be able to help really quickly break down, group, slice, dice, pivot that data to be able to get to the results that you're looking for. So each time that we're doing this work, the agent's generating different queries for you in the background, right? If you get to the spot where you're like, hey, look, this is great, but I actually want to be able to update my data, you can also update data through semantic data models. So in this case, your agent doesn't just have read access to the data, you can actually selectively enable it to be able to make updates to backend systems. So we have a new capability within our semantic data model called verified queries. This allows you to kind of construct specific SQL queries that you want to make repeatable and enable the agent to be able to access data and update data directly. Anytime we generate SQL, in this case, it can take some time to get the right answer to the open-ended question that you have. But if this is something that you're going to do once a day, once a month, every hour, every quarter, you can create a verified query. So if this is like, hey, this is exactly what I want. I'm going to ask this question a lot, so I want you to repeatedly answer it every time. Our verified queries enable you to really quickly be able to save the SQL that the agents generated. So the next time you come back the next day or for the next monthly close, it runs the exact same SQL every time. The next use case we want to walk through is invoice reconciliation. So like I mentioned before, a lot of the use cases that we're working with customers on, they start with a PDF. They start with some complex invoice and they end with an analyst digging into the data, putting it into Excel, identifying discrepancies, and then being able to kind of help deal with those discrepancies. But a lot of the work the human's doing is trying to find what are the issues, what are the discrepancies, and kind of in the swivel chair back and forth between different systems. So what we're going to look at is, how do we process things like PDFs within our agents? So in this case, we have an invoice processing agent, and we'll start with our semantic data model. So we do have a Snowflake database that has a lot of information about trades that have been entered into the system and known vendor invoices that we're expecting payment from. We also have a few verified queries. These are things that we've been working with this agent for weeks and months. So every time we process an invoice, there are two very specific questions that we're going to ask that we want to get a consistent answer to. All we have to do is just upload our invoice, ask our question, in this case, extract the invoice and help me reconcile it. And what it's going to do in the background is it's going to look for, hey, what are those questions that I need to be able to answer? What are those verified queries I have? And it's going to execute those. It's also going to deeply inspect that PDF and try to pull all the core information, headers, line items, tables out of it. You can easily see kind of what the agent sees, with our document intelligence UI, So you see exactly, how the agent's understanding the data, where it exists, and what information it's pulling out at any given time. And as the agent's actually working through this process, it's generating what we call our data frames, right? These are kind of like ways for the agent to be able to really quickly manipulate and work with data, but it's also really important for the agent to be able to show its work, right? So you understand how did it come to that conclusion? What are the intermediate calculations that were made? Where did that data come from with full lineage? So in this case, we can see in our invoice, we've got a lot of different discrepancies that we've identified. And we can kind of review the findings, and then we can also review the agent's thought process. But more importantly, we can start asking follow-up questions to be able to identify, in this case, if there's kind of commonalities between discrepancies we've seen and specific pipelines, for example. This list of data frames allows you to kind of skip back in the agent's history to see how it was kind of thinking about and working with that data over time, giving you a sense for, like I said, just the kind of the agent's thought process and how it arrived at, where it got to. So in this case, one of our big issues is we have a bunch of phantom trades, and we want to see if there's any kind of connection between specific pipelines in those trades. Any of those data frames we can at any time extract into a CSV file, so we can throw that in Excel or email it to one other analyst for follow-up. So in these examples, we kind of covered what are some different ways that agents can really quickly connect to, understand, and work with data. It could be in data, databases like Snowflake, Redshift, or others. It could be things like CSV files or Excel, or more commonly, data that's trapped, in unstructured data like PDFs. And in this case, we want to kind of focus on next is where are we seeing, a lot of these results across industries. So these aren't hypothetical and theoretical use cases. A lot of these use cases are real production use cases that we've worked with customers on, from manufacturing to engineering, to retail. But in each one of these scenarios, where it's really focused on financial operations within those companies, where analysts spend hours dealing with really complicated data sets that they have to be able to compare and reconcile, and then be able to audit and prove exactly why they came to that specific conclusion. So the results that we've seen are amazing as far as just saving people time when it comes to invoice processing, being able to deal with 200 plus page PDFs, thousands of line items, being able to reconcile that in minutes compared to teams of people that would spend hours to days just focusing on one really large complex invoice. This also covers things like payment remittance matching, where thousands of different vendors come in, and we can quickly analyze attachments to emails, match those to receivables, and get those paid. So a lot of this work has really been focused, like I said, on finance in production at multiple different customers. And so if you look at why this matters to finance teams, accuracy is number one. It's not optional, right? A single calculation error can cascade into a mountain of work to undo that, compliance issues, audit findings. And so our data frames are really focused on giving you SQL accuracy, not LLM hallucination, for doing really complex calculations for financial documents. Number two is audit, right? When auditors ask you, how did you arrive at this number? How did you actually prove that the agent did what it said it was going to do? Our audit trails are critical. Those data frames show you exactly how the agent arrived at the work that's been that it arrived at, right? And then every team is really focused on how do we get through monthly or quarterly close as fast as we possibly can. That's one of the key constraints. And so when reconciliation takes weeks or days, you're already behind the clock. So a lot of the work that our agents are focused on doing is how do we get you to a faster close with more accuracy. And volume is one of those things that's just continuing to increase. 350 invoices per month, thousands of remittance slips, 150 plus AP help desk tickets per day. Agents can handle that with 90% autonomy, 90% accuracy in autonomous operations. And this really helps as you think about having to scale the work that your team is doing without being able to scale headcount. So if we think about what are the kind of key things to get started, right? If you're tired of systems that can't talk to each other directly, waiting for data to be centralized, and relying on overburdened technical teams to help you work with and reconcile your data, these are three key things that you can look at. Number one is identify what are the kind of highest paying reconciliation use cases that you have today. Where is your team spending the most of their time to be able to compare different data to each other? And these are areas that we can really help with immediate measurable ROI, right, with our agents. Number two is data access, right? When it comes to enabling your analyst teams to be able to quickly work with, understand data, connect to data, upload and process data. Our agents and semantic data models really, really help with that ad hoc type of work that is typically seen in things like FP&A. And then start with, what are some of the key bottlenecks that you have in your monthly close? Where is your analyst spending the most time? Where are there areas where they have to deal with working with complex data sets together, and start there, right? And you can kind of work your way through the different business processes that you have to wrap up before you get to close. So if this is interesting, to you, as far as like looking at how you can deploy AI agents to be able to operationalize a lot of the financial analyst work that you do today, there's some great ways to get started. Number one, contact us. Contact us at AI. We're happy to work with you. We have a rapid agent deployment program where we work really closely with you to understand your use case, identify the right place to get started, identify a pilot and POC to get rolling with. And we have a whole host of different financial agents that we can quickly demo to kind of show you exactly how we solved a lot of different use cases in the back office for CFO. And follow us on our YouTube channel, and catch up with us on our blogs. So I want to kind of hit pause here, transition into some Q&A. Happy to take questions from people.